I am one of the co-leads of the Conservation Tools and Planning session. The other two co-leads, one is Robin Sell with Bureau of Land Management, and unfortunately she couldn't be here today, but she is here virtually. And then the other person is Seth Gallagher. He's from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, and I'm going to give a brief background or introduction to Conservation Tools and Planning, and then Seth will introduce our guest speaker that we have coming. So the Conservation Tools and Planning session or section of the recovery plan is a huge and daunting section. It includes a ton of different types of actions and categories. And the problem with this section is, well, I call it a problem, is it's not you get to go outside and build something or tear something down. It's you get to stay inside and sit in a room for hours and talk. So it's not the kind of actions that most of us as trained biologists or those working ranchers really want to engage in. It's probably some of our hardest tasks to continue to engage in these meetings after meetings after meetings. So this session, the Conservation Tools and Planning, is a priority one recovery action in the recovery plan. And I'm going to go through what's written in the plan because it's pertinent to this. And the plan states the action is to conserve existing habitats by improving federal resource management plan. No big task there, right? And collaborating with state and local governments and private landowners. So that means it involves everyone. It's not just the responsibility of one particular entity. And it's to improve public awareness, incentive, and resources for conservation. It includes some examples from things like NRCS's Sage Grouse Initiative, Working Lands for Wildlife program. WIT brought up some of the Fish and Wildlife Services programs like the Safe Harbor Agreements, habitat conservation plans. Colorado Parks and Wildlife has wildlife habitat program and conservation easements. So it really covers everything. The other thing that is included in the plan is they do try to narrow down the areas by prioritizing these plans and conservation tools to occupied and suitable habitat within 4 miles of leks in all populations. So in reality, it doesn't really cut it down much at all. So when Robin and Seth and I got together to plan for this session, we were really overwhelmed with how to move forward. What do we talk about? You could talk about each one of these things for an hour. And so we focused on one of the plans, or one of the actions, and there are 19 tasks associated under this action. And we focused on number 3.05, which is acquire and or protect private lands, prioritizing those adjacent to public lands with good quality habitat in collaboration with all our partners. So that's what we're going to focus on today, is private land actions, conservation easements in particular. So you've seen this map before. It's the entire range of the Gunnison sage grouse with Fish and Wildlife Services critical habitat. And one of the programs that was available on private lands is candidate conservation agreements with assurances. And that was something that Brandon kind of brought up dealing with these subsidies. And we have a number of those associated or enrolled in the program across the range. They're in the pink polygons here. And this plan is a Fish and Wildlife Service plan. But the problem with, well, one of the issues with this plan is it is designed to be enrolled before the bird is listed. And it offers a private landowner that's willing to do conservation actions on their land the incentive that if they do conservation actions on their land, when the bird is listed, they would not be required to conduct any additional regulatory actions on their property. So it gives the private landowner some assurance that what they're doing is enough on their property. So between CPW and Fish and Wildlife Service, we enrolled 40 properties across the range for just under 40,000 acres into this CCAA program. One of the potential issues with the CCA program, it's not forever. It's a 10-year program, a 20-year program. And as I think somebody mentioned earlier, that time is coming up for some of these properties. The more common private land protection tool are conservation easements. Those are seen in green on this map. And across the range, we have about 40,000 acres in conservation easements. And I need to step back and apologize because this conservation easement layer is an old layer. It comes from the 2014 report by Susan Lohr with the Gunnison Ranchland Legacy, Gunnison Ranchland Conservation Legacy. She put this report together when the bird was listed, and it's been extremely helpful. We're in the process of taking this data and the additional last 8 years of data and starting to enter them into the conservation efforts database that Leaf talked about earlier today. So I want to put a plug in, so if anybody knows of conservation easements, they can let me know and we'll get them into that database, which will be extremely helpful for prioritizing conservation easements in the future. As I mentioned earlier, land ownership is a huge factor in conservation easements and where those conservation easements can occur, as well as where and how we plan for management or treatments. So you can see that this conservation easement tool has been employed across the range of Gunnison sage grouse. But so how do we get to the next step? How do we decide where additional conservation easements might need to be looked at? So we need to look at the potential for conservation easements with strategic needs and opportunities. We need to look at connectivity. We need to look at habitat suitability, and all of these things with the utmost consideration of the fact that conservation easements are a voluntary action.